Namo Guru Me Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Me Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Guru Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Kande Lanje Gönje Dogane Raga Shoza Bonje Chonzen Chöje Jabo Gönje Lozanta Seda Jeba Nede Shazozo Dönje Nanga Sende Bende Cheze Olama Jebe Dongache Alo Debe Sena Shenjondo Dema Jeche Genyajoso Shenje Gyeltsen sa ji che ji cha wa a wa do so nam da ve ze ye le je ba so jo go la cha do mi ma ya ta me na ngo so go ra da se de ma do me lo te ma jo da so ji ni sa be ge wa de de da ro wa gue la kan be da je ba ra je ze lo san zha ba ye de be ni bo re do sa je jo me me ze be de ra je che me ye be wang bo zhang be yang te bo ma le zhong zi kan je ge be so je zong kan ba lo san zhang be sha la so wan de me me ze de la je che re che me ye me wang bo zhang be yang te bo ma le zhong zi sa ve da kan je ge so ye zong kan ba lo san zhang be sha la so wan de me me ze ve de la je je re ze che me wang bo zhang be yang de bo ma le zhong zi sa be da kan je ke be zo je lo san zhang be sha la so wan de ba de za ve la ma re bo je da so je wo ro be me te jo la ka je je be ko ne je zon de ko zon do je ngo ro je do zo ba de za ve la ma re bo ta zo ni ga lo be me de jo la ka je je be I would like to remind every one of ourselves here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. At least with that kind of contrived bodhicitta motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim discourse, discourse on the stages of the path leading to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. Allow me to read about a couple of pages from this Lamrim Chemo, the great Lamrim, on the stages of the path to enlightenment to give you the blessing of oral transmission followed by explanation. We are on page 197, volume number 3, in the English translation of Lamrim Chemo.
Made be be he be to but she take mama get me nani don't do judges but nam paru de she be them go but jote honky sir. Chun you double say judges and but nam de Tarakawa Jata, so by in the she and doi she do so. 오늘 제다제 라와로 신주베가 마가가냐 나와라 누르다바 메메치레체 나다라고 지베라 신네베 되자야 메다제 코자가 레도마라 마메사바테나 딘데베라 시데네시 나 따지메 신이여 통화담베 데바데마 저바조세자 메디 세셀레 디오소데야 멜라메 데와 뉴메고 조 마제바 거제 나라마조 레베 치윤조 마이바 거제 치사오 치르다 바로 라메 바로라메 바로라메보다 좀 유에드 좀 따라 유제 유제라 미데바 다와제바 디든다 제바 제바다 제바 마저바 거인바 대라인바 제다 지미롱 기병고 대대 제바데 여디제나 데나랑 고야바 마이라 메바 마이노 대다 이메제 원장아 냠바바 나와지바 타바바 제베 셔르 도다니 군도 되베 되시 제바 제바시 Roshi young Rangu Tobacco, Beta Baso, Kede, Yambabu, Tababi, said, Dotan Tabasum be, you were me, Shudayana, Tenem Riba, my inte. Gravity should do a tiny Basumban, Shannon, young Imbedi, young Tatajanga, Mebanjo. Conde Tambata, Tondi, Mena, Sanju, Tomi to Tavi, never journey. Really, and she didn't know she by the message. Here, Tony, we kill into a super new Denny, Nikala, Trevor, number show. She is a magician, you know, Omabilo, Loa Toby, but me, young and they were Tobani, young day, they were Muslim, Sheva Yina. Young day, they are going to go bed. Gobet Dembara Dion, Tonda Demba Sumbi. Tonda Demba maybe zero and young the top of the Tonda Baba Gobi, Demba was the Shah Governor, River to Jubi and Javali. Jeva Biba Timmy Joseph, the Ramela, the city that you do, Morola. Chunila hit the Shaba, the young motivator, Raji County or Motobo, Botopara. Tomato be the money, Chunila, the Shaba, Territory General, Josie, Juma member town. Juma member, the Shalom, the Bunny, don't give a good to be very on the Tara, the Junction may be tired, to Bazamo. Juma, me, Saturday, Shiva, the Shella, Devi, Yellow Devil. Suvana, Nika, Kanu de Mata, but I change the Shiva, the David Sherry. There is the Lankum, Sanju Jama Tommy, Imenjoa, Songo Jibe, Chana, Rang, water, Sin. They mean to buy the Lubu, Divano Simi, Labani, Amigo, I said. Maybe I said, you really Jama. la jema ma la khang khang shi wa ngo bo chung se jang min de jing wo lo bo de jema ma yi ba de xin la wa de ba bi bi ra xin yang de ba je ni me ping jing ren ge we tong de ba xie go je ba sha de be xue ji den ji go ba ma re ba xi ge de be di go ba ne be ke de be me lo so ba na ma ji we ra ngo de jin zhe wan zhong xi ba su de ji wo song wa jia wa ma yi ba de ni ye tie na ye na yi na ni rāshī te chēnchī rā dewa jebē chā tōpi wē shē rā sāṅgā pā rā chē bā tō mē bā yō nā yāng kāng wā chē rā dīñī rāshī mā yā bā tī yā chē rā tē tā tā yā tō tō sāṅ pā chē bā tō tā chē bā yō rō tē yā dā kā kūntō chē tē bā lā bā tē yā nē shē mā mā yā bā xē lā mē tē bā nī tū chē tō wā kāng shī shī wē yō tā wā chā wā mā yā bā tē nī nē rāshī yā bā rē lā wā tē tā mā chē bā tō wā tā bā ngō bā mā yā shē ngō bā mē wā mā yā tē tēnē rāngshī jē xēwā nī bē xē rā rō xē sōng sō dē rā ngō bā yī mē nē ngā rā rā yī sō mā yu kā sō xē bā tā rāng kī bā ngō yu bā tā yī mē yī nō tē tā tā chū nā rā ngā ngō bā tē bē rāngshī tē chū bā tū tsā wā yā mē bā tē lā bē rāngshī jī tōng bē tōng yī nē sō sō jī chū yī tē tā chē yī rā xē bē定的起就说也别老几个月，那么第一个月吧，明天行。你那的老板，当你的当他们的吧，大吧，我这就老看个这让西没把到别个到我天你，看别当的我说都到别我说呢，让西没钱的让西的那位，去那他们这边到别去你的我说的西边去进宿舍别这也没有别。대답이 중에 더 최지원이 로이 뭐는 미비데 니 추니 더 최진 저번에 타니베 로신 지금 거는 샤고소 다시 샤고 타는 저 기존 현존도 들으셔 강제 그지 정신 체벌 숨돼서야지 해서 다시 다 지도는 정신세야 돼 가르쳐서 정신세야 돼 요래 요 말이지 고불들게 시기를 시고 말이지 지다 어디가 잘해 그래서 로본지 해지 뭐 요도 현대사 지당랑 있어야 돼 요래 요 말이지 매일은 내 자디서 요아디서 건강한데 이제 좀 뒤져보는 정말 뭐죠 최는 신이 되는 예반이 세자와 송소 신이 지샤와니 요도 세다 정신 최는 게 뒤져와 지든 소나 마소나 최담지 정신 맞아고 랑자 되가라고 서지 마주들나 이제 상이 전에 정신 맞아 레도 말봐 어디 계자 어디시도 신이 정신 예시 신이라 정신 세도 왔을 때 요래스 신이 지저 지시 지대야 지시 신다 신이 세야 저뭐 뒤정신 세야 저들 가르스나 제 메라서 비야 바데다 게 정신노 대다 그 정신양 강지시는 대다 그 쇼만만 이번이다 현을 때봐 매봐 가연 받대 머리 베르르들이 히베 도바체 라고 세다 정신세야 돼 가르데 지당가 정신을 데 나도 군도 작발 정신이나 베나 그래서 매사와 취일람버서야 돼 정신샤자로 다다디 디정신이 말이지 정신 타두샤야로 또 정신 타다다 정신 예스 수정신 되세는 엔 미정신 데바트베 동아디 미정신 사도 되레스 뭐 되레스 그래서 대다가 야 거기에는 대다가 좀만 많이 받니다 현을 때문에 니임바 때 머리베 세테다 정신세야 다들 좀 많이 세야 되더래자 좀만 많이 봤어요 다 되래 유진부터 좀 많이 봤지 현을 때문에 봤어야 되더라 현을 때문에 봤어야 돼 정신 매 봤었는데 덴바 매 봤었는데 때야 뜻사 좀 좋고 말아 그 다음에 있는 정신이 비차러 와 그래서 내려대는 정신이 매가 샤브레스는 배는 팔을 쓰러 잡으지나 팔을 돈 쓰러 샤 쓰러 팔을 샤고 뜻사 좀 좋고 와 다 정신이 매가서 그걸 당부권 정신이 매다 근데 때는 샤 말이스 그런 당부권을 매매 가르쳐 봐 그러봐 어디에서 가서 대다지만 말에 이제 현대 때문에 봐 거의 봤대 머리를 잡다 TV 힘에 떠고 샤위 랑고 어때 때다 보이는 라시메 봤을 때 라시 타도 그러는데 얘는 가서 수지고 들어서 왜 인베 시다와 신의 또 말이지. 방금부터는 그 양피하고 실을 취셔 저기 위디 예매 또야 저러와. 어떻게 되는 건데 당사 되지 세번도 되도 그래서. 인간도 또 말이지. 그 딘들지리면 돼.
So that was Blessing of Oral Transmission of Lamrim Chenmo. Geshe read from page 197 to the top of 200, volume number 3 in the English translation of Lamrim Chenmo. And now Geshe has started to give explanation. And so last time we talked about, as the critics kind of assumed that Rangshin or nature is kind of dependent upon those three conditions, right? And we talked about how that's not the assertion or the standpoint of Prasangika Madhyamikins. And so to continue with our conversation from there on, the central question that's being asked is there a such thing as Rangshin or nature? Simply translated as, does nature exist or it doesn't exist? Okay. So to answer that question, we really have to sort out, what kind of a nature are we talking about in this particular context? And as Geshe explained before and again today, that we can talk about nature in terms of conventional nature, or in Tibetan called Kunsobje Rangshin, which means if we ask about what is the conventional nature of fire, so the conventional nature of fire is heat, right? What is the conventional nature of water? It is the liquidity, if you will. But we are not talking about that kind of conventional nature in this particular context. Rangshin or nature in this particular context refers to the final nature or the ultimate nature, right? Rangshin Tartuba in Tibetan. And so that really refers to the emptiness of intrinsic reality or existence. So that is the final or ultimate nature of things. And that nature exists, primordially. It has really nothing to do with Tathagatas or Buddhas coming into the world or not coming into the world. It is not contingent upon a Buddha's appearance in the world, because that nature is how everything actually exists. That is an unfabricated or non-fabricated nature. It's not an artificially created nature. It is a nature as it is. Okay? So we call it Chima Mayimba, a non-fabricated, unartificial nature. And so when we talk about nature of, say, eyes, the visual perception we're talking about, so its final nature is the emptiness of intrinsic existence of the eyes, the visual perception. So that's the final nature of eyes, for example. And that would be the true in the case of all other existence or phenomena. And so that nature is non-fabricated in the sense that it is not a product of causes and conditions, right? It's not something produced by cause and conditions. Emptiness of intrinsic reality is not a product of cause and effect relationship. It is not the kind of reality that is, so to speak, a relative in nature. Relative in the sense, we talk about, this hill and that hill, right? This hill and that hill exist relatively, right? Because in relation to this reference, we say that hill, and so this hill becomes that hill, reference to that, right? It's a relative existence. But the emptiness of intrinsic reality, the ultimate nature, is not, relative in that sense. It has, that's how the things have existed, from the beginning, So it's important to realize that. And we, the ordinary people, have no understanding or realization of this ultimate nature of reality, right? We are ignorant towards how everything actually exists. So then if you ask the question, who knows about it then? If we are ignorant about it, then somebody got to understand and realize it. This is how we often refer to the transcendental wisdom of Aryas, or the transcendental beings in the state of meditative equipoise and emptiness. When the Aryas or the Pakpa, transcendental beings, are absorbed into that meditative state of emptiness, right? And so for that wisdom in the state of meditative equipoise, nothing else exists except this ultimate nature or emptiness. And that transcendental wisdom sees the emptiness non-conceptually, means directly, nakedly, as it is, right? There is no intermediary or some kind of a veil in between. It just sees as it is. Yeah? And so it is from their perception, realization point of view, we establish the ultimate nature of phenomena.
단다디 가서 파박 걸 셔그세야 돼. 그런 내도 시다와시도야 돼. 파박 셔그세 뭐도요. 수지고 돈이 또 말세고 뭐또 그러와. 지도 또 버리 받을다. 이놈 마시나 상식 시험지 내니지랑 것도 또 버디도 파박즈 관계 군서 때문에 무슨 또 선도 무슨 또 저 내니 좀 또 그러와. 다 되는 뭐 수지로서는 에 정지 통지시 다 지 리베 드롭니 지도가 뭐 세버 셴비 내지 하고 싶은 거야 말아. 다 통주 somse 여러와 어디 여레스 다 그래서 내가 일체봤으면 돼서 얘네 인도대이 동유 쪽으로서 하는 어머니 인도대이라 동유 러시메가 도모고 타와가 뭐 친구마서래 어디 타와데 가르서는 쉐탐지양서 시어 말했다 뒤시시 뒤시시도 다 제봤으면 가자는 러시 좀는 거도 얘네 제봤으면 샤그래 세다디 제봤으면 돼 많이 받대 ini ninde debe ini ngo ga jujil debe ha ko insa in che wasu de ma ha ko ri che ti ga je se re ma ri la wa ta toni de che wasu de sha do wa ka se na shen le me de ba se de dang ye shu da je rong shi me ba se de rong shi chu ba de rong shi me ba sha ko ma ba ko tang bo rong shi me ba yin ki dang me rong shi sha ro wa o ti ta juje ma je ban le la she ko de ma she ro wa ta nam jo she na me de se de 배나 처마서 회사든 처마샤에 처마든 회사샤 거기 편주 떠서 하고 그러와. 그래서 정신에 받대 애네 정신 주발 때 너희가 샤스에 라고 말와. 그래서 남바 상조서 그러와. 남바 상조서 남조 해를 맞대 버셔야 돼와. 그래서 돈이 되다 남조 해는 맞대 같이 제발 숨대 되려고. 어디 있어. So just a moment ago, this is what I said. Ordinary sentient beings like us, Sodje, we do not have the understanding and of course the realization of emptiness as it is, the final nature. Okay? And we said that the transcendental beings or the Aryas, the Pakpa, have a direct insight and experience into that very ultimate nature. Yeah. But I would like to also clarify, we are not saying that ordinary people can never understand emptiness. That's not what we are saying, right? As ordinary, we have ignorance pertaining to emptiness, but we could, still study and work and think and analyze, and we can understand emptiness. So our understanding of emptiness, presuming that we do have one, right? And that understanding is still very conceptual understanding, because we understand emptiness through the image of, through its generic image, right? We don't have a direct experience into what emptiness is. So who sees emptiness as it is, without any kind of, veil, so to speak? So it is the Aryas or transcendental beings' wisdom in the state of meditative equipoise and emptiness. Because in that, their wisdom and emptiness as if has become non-dual, right? There is no intermediary, there is no veil in between. They see as it is. Okay? And so I want to make that clarification. And the other day, we talked about this, how the identification of the object of negation, Gakcha, is an understanding of emptiness
is not contingent upon those three conditions, right? The three conditions that we talked about, and we have been through those arguments and argumentation before, are, I should say, that, for example, in the lower schools of thought, they do accept the cause and effect relationship among products or duje, produced phenomena, right? And intrinsic reality is not simply contingent upon the cause and effect relationship. If that is what it is, then we had assumed that in that, like a Sharvakas, so they do already have the understanding of emptiness, that Prasangika Madhyamikans do assert. But we already talked about that argumentation analysis, that from Prasangika Madhyamika point of view, what has been explained in the lower schools of thought is still, not the complete picture of what emptiness is. So we have been through all of that. So today what we talked about is what is the final nature of phenomena. So that is what we call emptiness of intrinsic reality. So that emptiness of intrinsic reality is, not contingent upon these three conditions. Number one, that it is not contingent upon cause and effect relationship. Right? Things have been empty of intrinsic reality from the very beginning, right? It's not like somebody created it in later on, not like cause and effect relationships kind of come into the picture and then created emptiness. That's not what it is, okay? So that's one important factor to think about. The other thing is we said that, the emptiness of intrinsic reality, is not posited in the sense of how, we talk about the subject and object relationship. Right? Something is considered as an object, in relation to its perception, and something is considered as a perception in relation to its object. So subject and object relationship, right? That is again interdependent upon each other. But emptiness of intrinsic reality is not again contingent upon that kind of interdependence, between this and that, X, Y, Z. Okay, in the case of this and that here, we talked about again. That is, in the law of relativity, right? Without this, there can be that. Without that, there can be this, right? But again, emptiness is not posited because there's something called intrinsic existence. And now we said, well, in relation to that, there is emptiness, absence of intrinsic reality. That's not what it is, because things are empty of intrinsic nature from the get-go.
데마트바라기시야지 냐 체디 네르타드라기시야지 먼저 지게 타니데 에코 근데 그런 메코나라기시야도 왜 마지막에 좀 두고도 와 어디 좀 주어 시에서 디나다 다다디 나 춘이라기시야디 체디 네르타드 들다라기시고 그래서 어디 인시고다 춘이디 라기타도 되게 되면나 이제 저기서 봐도 배 Any gave up to my source that devotion in some year to the Kawajataji and Doy and the Shida, any poem about Juris. He told the men, Tony Gumia Yomarwa. Tony Gumia, Tawata, that time you were kind of Yomarwa. Or she said, he told tell you ever any the Biva Mambu drop Shasu. Timenda, Sanjia, the Tawata, Jim, no.
So why are we having this whole discussion about whether nature exists or doesn't exist? What kind of a nature? Because there are many ways to understand what Rangshin is, nature is. So that's why it gets confusing. When we have so many different meanings of what it is, then we know which one is that we're talking about. For example, sometimes the word Rangshin, or the term I should say, not the word, it's a term. In Tibetan, Rangshin, translated nature, is taken to mean true existence as a nature, right? And that really doesn't exist in reality. And sometimes the Rangxin or the nature is understood in terms of conventional nature, right? We can ask about, hey, do you know about the nature of this person? Is he or she a kind person or kind of an irritating or annoying one? Geshe didn't say that. I just made it up, right? Because we want to know what kind of, the person has. Maybe in today's language, it's the attitude, right? But that's another kind of a nature, right? But the nature that we are talking about in this context is the niluk thardu, the final nature of a reality and existence, right? And so we have to understand that nature could mean different things in different contexts. And so one of the important points here is, does that final nature exist? In other words, is there such thing as emptiness of intrinsic reality? The simple answer to that question is yes, right? And if things were not empty of intrinsic reality, then a lot of fallacies would pop up. For example, bodhisattvas, right, they engage in their paths and practices for eons and eons, right, to accumulate positive energy merit. The reason why is they want to be Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. If things are not empty of intrinsic reality, they can never be Buddhas, right? So all the hard work that they do is a fiasco, right? So what's the point of that, right? And not only that, we cannot become Buddha if things were not empty of intrinsic reality. We can even not be free from samsara or single existence, because to be free from samsara, we must realize the final nature, emptiness of intrinsic reality.
다 뒤에다 뒤 랑시 열세 다 연주 제바 주더라. 그다 랑시다 랑시 주와 지금 송주요라. 오늘가 제대 랑시 주 마가서 냐는 랑 너다버서 많이 시는 랑 오트베 랑시 다디 뎀바트베 랑시들와. 디 메시베 모두 지단 랑시 단디 요말 라고 말스. 랑시 주베 뎀바트베 너다버서 많이 랑시디 요말 라위스. 실레모 불라사 인시. 근데 딘데베 랑시네 최나를 따지다 단디 랑시 세야디. 너다버서 많이 랑시 세야디. 먼저 군저 쉬어도 파쇼. 인 돈이 거나 요말 시랑 히르바 디랑 히르바 요말바 또버다버 제 미차라발. 어디 또버다버서 많이 베디 알리 군저 쉬어도 게도 파쇼. 충이 거나 아니 랑시 주바 요말레스. 그러나 랑시 최나 내루레디 그 최도 랑시 내루이 바도 랑시 마르베 기와고 마르와.
No. So in the arguments between the critic and Pasangika, Madhyamika, and if you will, critic seems, a particular critic, I should say, has maybe, got confused between the two types of nature. The nature as intrinsic reality or truly existent reality, and the nature as what we call the final reality or the nature. So thinking of those two as synonym, one and the same thing, so then they are trying to make that argument, right? Do things have nature or not? And then they think, if you say yes, then they, well, now you said that things have intrinsic reality, don't you, right? Because they got confused, right? So our position is that, we have to differentiate between those two types of nature, okay? If we're talking about nature in terms of intrinsic reality, our answer is no. Right? There is no such thing as intrinsically existent phenomenon. But if we're talking about nature in terms of the ultimate mode of existence of things, that things are emptied of intrinsic reality, that being the final nature, the answer is yes, right? And so, can't, mix up the two things under the same term, nature, right? We can't do that. So as Geshe explained, that nothing exists intrinsically, period, right? That is the assertion or the standpoint. Literally, nothing exists intrinsically, including emptiness. Emptiness is the final truth or the nature of phenomena, but the emptiness itself does not exist intrinsically, right? So there is a distinction, isn't it? Emptiness is the final nature of things, but the emptiness does not exist intrinsically. Okay? And so it's important to keep that in our mind.
먼저 가제실 다 땡겨로서 또바다로 뭐 저가 쉬지 요바 지각을 말래.
No.
다들이야 네 링고 가자세는 야 군주 버쉬도 냠샤고 뭐 주바디야 가자지 혀거로 와.
Nare.
어디 샤다다 디게다 냠샤고 뭐 접신실이야 아니 덴바 접고 그래 삼샤 삼니 더 보가마도 몽버지 셔다 돈이 된저 인생이 지도 와.
No, so.
다 냠샤 뭐 좀 덴바 접고 그래 덴바 접자니요 말이 셔다 냠샤를 유요 말이 지고다.
No, so.
어디 가니 셔거라.
Nare.
어디 니데게 십자도든 제마다 된 샤고다.
No. So a lot of this debate going back and forth between critics and Pasankika Madhyamikins oftentimes has to do with the meaning of the terminology being used, right? When we use the same word, rangshi in nature, and it could mean multiple things, and then if we don't differentiate between which one, then the how should I say, confusion and doubts do remain. And according to Prasankika Madhyamikins or Uma Tengjubar, when we talk about gaksha, object of negation or refutation, what it is, the refutation is the intrinsic reality, right? Something that exists in and of itself without being merely labeled by terms and concept, right? Such a thing does not exist, isn't it? But then in certain other contexts, object of negation or gaksha could refer to something else. Okay? For example, when we talk about Arya's wisdom in the state of meditative equipoise on emptiness, nyamsha, right? Arya's. For that wisdom, except emptiness, nothing appears for that wisdom, isn't it? So no conventional phenomena appears to that wisdom. So all conventional phenomena, in a sense, is the object of negation for that wisdom. Okay? But that does not mean, because things don't appear for that wisdom in the state of meditative equipoise, we cannot conclude that, nothing exists at all now. Look at that, right? It doesn't see it. No, that's a wrong conclusion, isn't it? So we have to know what kind of gaksha or object negation we are talking about. And so this is really a very difficult point to deal with, right? And even many early Tibetan great scholars of the past time, they have difficulty understanding this. So that's why we have different positions on this, right? Some early Tibetan masters, so they think that emptiness must exist intrinsically or truly. Why? Because that's, Arya's wisdom in the state of meditative emptiness, it sees it. If that wisdom sees something, it better exist truly or intrinsically, right? That's how they come up with that, right, notion. With me, right? So they have still failed to understand something. Then others have come, Well, nothing exists for that wisdom in the state of meditative equipoise, so nothing exists at all. So, it's nothingness again. So this is how, when we look at that such a high-level realization point of view, so scholars, even have difficulty understanding that, and then they come up with all those, problematic assertions.
어디 다다들이 라시 쳐봐 숨대도空点다 직sel이 두 숨디왕 매일매일 뉴명고 마시바 간시 가 마셔데 신종 마이바 간시 취차 수르다 파르라 라 파르라 릉보 통고데 유진 라 때바지바 마주와 간에 바테네 에데 강이 바디 랑시 바주도 소 랑시 세도 니세세워서 다다디 랑시 세디 에데 매 차와나 이지마도 취사와데 가르시나 간지 니만을 잘로이네 멜마도 고 사버려야 사버리고 말와 매드코는 저자는 수지도 멀고 차여 랑시 접자 어디 단단 내루데 어디 랑시 랑시도 세워레 닌도고 랑시도 세워 말이스 어디 지마자 가르사 파르 저다 유진 세다 파르 스르셔야 돼 इन फल दिन सुरक्षा सुरद फलक्षा धीरे मारिस को करे न बे रही मेमे करे मधु को रही जुबाल दिन रही में शाबर से धीरे कैसे हमारा वो दिस
So in the middle of page 198, we have a passage quoted from great Indian master Chantakirti's clear words, or Siksal. And as Geshe has explained that, the final nature of existence of phenomena is not contingent upon some of those conditions we already talked about, cause and effect conditions, or the sort of law of relativity per se. And so what is explained is this, that in the case of even conventional nature of fire is hot or heat, isn't it? But that is the very nature of the fire. It's not like something else has made the fire hot, right? If you're talking about hot water, well, that's not the nature of the hot water. Either you cooked the water, or maybe the sun heated up the water. There's something that contributed to its being hot. But the fire is just hot, Nobody else make the fire hot, So in that sense, when we talk about final nature of things, it is a natural state of things, isn't it? It's not somebody artificially created or like contributed to that. Things have been empty of intrinsic nature from the very beginning, and so that's important to be recognized. As we have said this few times already, in the case of this and that, the law of relativity is very important to take into account, right? Without this, there cannot be that. Without that, there cannot be this. Okay, there's interdependence. For that. But the final nature of thing is not dependent upon such a notion of relativity. It's not like well, there is existence, so therefore there is no true existence. Right? It's not contingent upon something existing intrinsically truly, and then we can say this something doesn't exist intrinsically. That cannot be the case.
Me kachi me rangi ngote tabi choba ti yodam shena tene rang ngu yoba main las me ba main las ta tisi wa ta ti te ta cheba sundi sha pige rangshin de thadu te edi yore yomare sena yod shena rang ngu yoba main se rang jing twa de ma twa yomare wa di ta pi de tongyi khona jan de ge sa di ta me tongyi le na de ge me tongyi ro di eni yeba mai karsa ngo yeba mai la meba mai sidizan tanyi de meba mai yo hito tanyi charo wala o tanyi de meba mai dembar yo tuba mai siasi.
So again, coming back to that basic fundamental question, does final nature ngo exist? The answer is yes, right? And that final nature refers to the emptiness of intrinsic reality. Okay? And we can talk about emptiness of intrinsic reality of any phenomenon. Let's say fire, right? Its the ultimate nature. The truth is emptiness of intrinsic, reality of fire. So that nature exists. Okay. Now, how you ask, how does it exist? It exists conventionally, right? It does not exist intrinsically. Okay. So that's the important matter. Okay. So that final nature is not non-existent because it exists conventionally, isn't it? Yeah. But then it exists, but it does not exist in and of itself or intrinsically. So it is empty of, right, intrinsic reality. Nonetheless, it exists. Yeah. So why is there so much emphasis upon that things do exist conventionally? They don't exist intrinsically, right? Almost like we're repeating this mantra over and again. It's because, when we don't understand the final nature as it is, it could really scare us off, right? Because we might think, well, nothing exists at all. Oh, my goodness, And it can freak us out. So in order to prevent that, fear of, freaking out, I want to say that. So there's emphasis, things do exist. They exist conventionally. So at least we're asserting that things do exist, so don't freak out, But they don't exist just the way we think they exist because they don't exist intrinsically.
다 틀리용지 저버지서 걔들 년보고 잡아보면 실 로단 때문에 송부에서 예와 메시오되냐 되는 다 들어 다들 로단에 애니 타이 지 애니 송르세 잡아봐야 송르세와 진짜 로단 다 건데 진짜 로단 매와 좀 지대 로단 매와 샤그라 다들 로단에 매베 혼데 말봐 또왜 따와 또왜 마도 그러요 말세야 또 인비게 지대 거라고 타이 되는 셰브레스 디마도 디타크에서 다 로다 있는 요 말이시다 피진관서 지대 지다 타이시나 디고 로다 일세는 매버도 샤그라 디디 다다 땡큐를 다시나 술로다 로다는 매고 말봐 최근 거 더블 로다 비차와
Now another term that could cause some confusion is the Tibetan term called Trotaba, which has been translated as fabrication here, right, literally. And so again, we need to really tease out the different levels of meaning of Trotaba or fabrication. In a very conventional sense, right, when we in a conventional world, we say, hey, that's just a fabricated thing, story. It's not real, right? That means it's a false story. That's how we understand, right? That's the conventional meaning. Hey, fabricated story is not a real story, right? But that's not the meaning of Trotagba or fabrication in this context. According to Prasangika Madhyamikins, fabrication here, I don't think the English word really works well here. I think the Trotagba should be, in this context, be translated as conceptual labeling or imputation. Yeah. According to Prasangika Madhyamikins, everything is merely labeled by terms and concepts. There isn't any phenomenon that has not been labeled by terms and concepts. That is also called fabrication. It is as if the conceptual thought has, right, contributed to that. But that reality, it exists. It's not a false story. It's a true story, isn't it? Everything exists as being merely labeled by terms and concepts. So therefore, it's very important for us, again, to tease out this meaning of Trotagba, fabrication as being a false story, or fabrication is something that doesn't have to be false, but it really exists.
러시아면은 탄이 뒤에 송어와 어디 송인데 돈이 지고 자요 말지 최 거리 있는 이니 되게 뒤송으로 시고다 그래서 뭐 최현한제 인베스 탄이 뒤에 돈다 메서 찍바래 시고다 최신이 데모터 돼요 말발 어디 그 아니 그 찍바래 그래서 뒤에는 그바티 따서 최현한제 인베 대다지 매반 줘로 로다는 매고에는 So with reference to final nature or emptiness of intrinsic reality, what has been said that it exists and how it exists conventionally, okay, but it does not exist intrinsically. Yeah? And it's very important for us to understand that, otherwise we might freak out, because if we think emptiness as meaning nothing existing at all, that can be a very freakish notion, as you can see. And so that understanding of emptiness is also applicable to all other phenomena. It's not only emptiness we are talking about as existing conventionally, but not intrinsically. As a matter of fact, we are saying that every phenomenon, che in Tibetan, dharma, right, it exists conventionally, but it does not exist intrinsically. And so that has to be understood. And so to understand that, this notion of Trotagba, if I am allowed to use the word fabrication, which is confusing a lot here already, it exists, right? Everything that we experience in everyday life, our sensory perceptions, engage in them, they do exist, right? That's why we engage with them. But they don't exist intrinsically, but they exist conventionally. So all of these things exist because our terms and concepts have labeled onto them. So call that fabrication is a reality. It stands, true. Okay. Keva Mambo Sosa Johnson, any Rankin said, "Mena, Tilla, Keva Mambo Tamik Karsa, Kawacheva, Tommy, you is a drop side wall.
Nore.
The young joy and Jungle, Rankin didn't love you, Sheva, but you say that the Rankin said, she Rankin, the Lobon little killing goddess.
No, so.
Mastake here, Tom the Kalen, the Shuba Nuba, Rankin, the Nigala Travani, the number shop, here's some wishes. What is Rankin said, Neil Tadu, Rankin said, you are a little here.
No, so.
But what?
No,
No.
no. So earlier we have seen this, assertion being made that final nature or emptiness of intensive reality, it does exist. If it were not to exist, then all the practices and hard works of the bodhisattvas for eons and eons accumulating merit and wisdom would be useless, because at the end of the day, it is not going to lead to any outcome, right? Without realizing the emptiness of intensive reality, there is no Buddhahood. Forget about Buddhahood, there is no nirvana from samsara, right? But that's not the case. Things are empty of intensive reality, and therefore we could realize that, and we could be free from samsara, and we could attain Buddhahood. So that final reality or the nature that we have just talked about quite a bit, it is actually asserted by the great Indian master Arya Nagarjuna, Gombolutup. Those of you who have got the text at the bottom of page 199, so there is a reference to that Arya Nagarjuna assert that emptiness of intensive reality is the final truth or the nature of things, and it does exist.
Here's the machine, no Oma will look at Tuataba Mizu and Joker, Yang de Watawani, Yang de Gudi Sheba, Yang de Tayan, Gojan, did the but hearing. Tea told them with them submission, told them with the shows. That the Chuni Ranhiti Mena. Any Tuataba Tarba, the Sanjivatawa Yomaris. Because they told him Gordon Yomaris. Did I tell you alone, the young Gordon Shazan Haraji? Dutch Mangonzel and that. Ronji Major and doing for Lama Jemaji, Lama Shawaran.
No.
That I think you really teach about it. They know you Lama Jemaji, love this all. Any young day Tambo, they go there Tambo to cut it towers and the chewing was dog champion on the shower. They know me that the same thing you see chewing was dog with Hazamato, they know you be shower. So the chewing was dog with what shower that, but they shower. So that chewing was dog with your was.
No.
어디면 뒤는 딱 거기서 도와용 봐라. 어디 거기 탈바 탐지지만 그냥 도야면 타고도 없어. 다 저기 타도 되면은.
So we're continuing with this assertion that final nature or the ultimate nature of the truth, it does exist. Okay. So it is asserted by Arya Nagarjuna, and it's very much asserted by the Prasangika Madhyamikans. And if it were not to exist, then according to Prasangika Madhyamikans, we would not have a way to assert true cessation or Gyeltsen, right? That would not be true cessation. If things were not empty of intrinsic reality, there would not be true cessation of suffering. And as Geshe explained, again, this is another complex notion. I think it's related to that is in the Sevatandika Madhyamikan schools, Umar Rangkyuba and below, of course, they have their own assertions about what the ultimate reality is, right? And how that leads to their outcomes or the goals and true cessation. So there they talk about, for example, arahats. With remainder, without remainder, isn't it? That English term is not really elegant, so what can I do about that? But which really is to do with whether you have achieved the true cessation or arahatship in this lifetime, right? If you do, you still have this remainder of the body, so you are called arahats with remainder. And once you abandon the physical aggregate, then you become the arahat without remainder, footnote closed, okay? So that's how, with or without remainder, Lakchel Hangme is explained in terms of whether you have the remainder of the physical aggregate or not contaminated, right? But according to Prasangika Madhyamikans, what is remainder or not, again, is explained again differently as well, because that has to do with the tenang, the remainder of the appearance of true existence, isn't it? Do you have the appearance of true existence? If you have, then you have some kind of remainder or leftover, right? Remnant. If you don't have the appearance of true existence, then you don't have any remnant of that, right? There's a langme, okay, if you will. So that's why, according to Pasankika Madhyamika schools, when ordinary sentient beings like us, people, let's say, let's not confuse with the sentient being, or people, we make our effort, and for the first time, we realize emptiness or the final truth non-conceptually, right, first moment. And in the state of meditative equipoise on emptiness, so for that wisdom, in a sense, there is no appearance of true existence or intrinsic existence, okay, for that very wisdom. So the realization of emptiness or final nature is very important, because that is also related to the true cessation, right? Once you realize the emptiness nakedly, because that could lead you to, right, the true cessation of suffering. So therefore, the understanding of lakche langme, remainder without remainder, has a different ways of understanding it.
Nyangde de tobe se toba gobe de bogu shagova rigba tuji jebe beba tebe jobsos o de ta rigba tuji jeba pije dawa ta be mendo lo lo zo rangje yin be dawa ta be dewa jire o se da nyangde thoma to da ene to yin go so to nyam sha ga thok go de ene da rigba tuji changani di khong xie ne beba tebe job shas 세다 냠샤가 톱고인데 다 돈이고서 또 병은 톱고라.
네.
다 돈이면은 인티고 더야 고대 요거 지고 요마라.
네. On page 199, there is a reference to commentary on the 60 stanzas of reasoning. And let me quote it, because it's just one sentence, and then translate the explanation given. In his commentary on the 60 stanzas of reasoning, Rigpa Tukshoba in Tibetan, Chandrakirti takes pains to prove that when you attain nirvana, nyangde, you must perceive the ultimate truth of cessation. Okay? Which means that only when you realize emptiness, the final nature, nakedly, non-conceptually, okay? So it is in that state of direct realized emptiness that you will attain nirvana. Without that, state of the mind, you cannot achieve nirvana. So that is contingent upon the fact or the assertion that things are empty of intrinsic reality, right? Because what is emptiness that you are realizing? It is the emptiness of intrinsic reality of things, and it exists, okay? By realizing that non-conceptually, in that state of the mind, you can also achieve nirvana. If things were not empty of intrinsic reality, then there is no such realization possible, and then therefore there is no nirvana attainable. Okay.
ene ti bida garsa rang wo te ra hi de ba te ba ti amaris da de chyin le ya rang hi se di rang hi ta du te amaris che da rang hi ni kha ya amaris chyin de ene da chyin di ne lu ta du be sha ne rang hi de re di rang hi de re di na ko di pe na me gi chyin de ene me gi ne lu ta du rang hi ba di ene ji se wo ba jo ji lo garsa 샤바 디트업장 런신 때 조시 좀이 멤버 탕스 어디 다다다 디 춘이디 매그 춘이디 이 런시세 샤바스음데 초요리디 디나 코디야 조시 좀마 말이지 좀마세는 거 디러가 당기리 취해야 돼 그러고 런신 매바세야 돼 런신 여발 때 런신 매 샤고 말아 어디 조시 좀마세야 봐 어디 샤고 말이지 때 현래 메데 바네 랑고 데베라지 테르 중세제 메베 당이도 줘봐 자모 다 동이데 당이도 줘봐 자모 어디래
So we're on page 199. So Phuntsok or conventional phenomena, all of them exists conventionally or nominally, but not truly or intrinsically. And so conventional phenomena are not the ultimate nature of themselves. The ultimate nature of conventional phenomena is the emptiness of intrinsic reality of each of themselves. Okay? And that emptiness, it exists conventionally, and it doesn't exist in of itself. So as we have talked about this with reference to the emptiness of the eyes, the visual perceptions, right? The emptiness of the visual perception is the final nature of that visual perception. Okay? And it exists conventionally, and that emptiness is not contingent upon those three factors we already talked about, such as cause and effect relationship, the law of relativity, and etc.
ngami sadi chue be cheba da shela de be yije la de bo sa je je se de je ma se de ini kan je sojo ja so ji kan je tambu ko tu de me ba ji la ini je ma se ga wa chi ji di ji to ba wo so su so na ra ji ni ko de ya ma zho be chen yi la ra ji de che ra ji de dai yue che du lam gom ne gom be na sam ju de me de min yo wa song xin se da su so de de gom ya ma da ko Rahi kare, ne tadu rahi ta yamare, any cor debate rahi khan yamarwa. So the Toji Kai Maya di Karza, Nekab Tadu rahi of the Kayamaris. Chui de rahi the race, Karas Mixo to most you the Chu or the tell any Petaba Tamisha Tomogo, the Nelu rahi the Zen, and they go some you to you make Tagiteva Shumzama. What did you answer? So
we're in the middle of page 199, where there's a statement, I quote, fabricated means produced in the sense of a new occurrence of something that did not exist before. To depend upon something else means to depend on causes and conditions, unquote. So as Geshe explained, that Chema, the Tibetan word, means fabrication. It has a sense that, something did not exist, from the very beginning, but something has been brought into existence, right, by causes and conditions later on, right? Something you have created, right? Chema could mean creation, okay? Final nature of thing is not a creation. It's not a fabrication in that sense. And as Geshe explained, that the objects of our sensory perceptions, including visual forms, they are not the final nature of themselves. Their final nature is the emptiness of intrinsic reality of each of themselves. And by meditating on that final nature, we are able to attain nirvana and enlightenment, right? We are never going to achieve nirvana and enlightenment meditating on the forms or the sounds or things like that, because that is not the final nature of things, right? We meditate on the final nature of forms, sounds, etc., which is the emptiness of intrinsic reality.
make sure the still tadu ranking se aj here wa the gig mari lewa wa the mege the jungle jema ma kan shi ngo wa jung se ja men du jo lo bu du jema ma ye ba ta here de ba me ran xin yang de ba che ne pin jing ge tong ju wa xie go study zhe ba di sa wa de kiro de ran hi de ba me se ya de ni tadu ranking se de be ge wa se ka se so lo di se 제가서 저 대주 이거만 말을 봐 시대 저런 데에 대주 그 고안에도 라고 샤샤시고 그러와 제때 네 공부니 게데 매우서 받는 이런 때진 저완 좋아 시바수도 주 송아셔와 거에 봐 니니 되나 이런 힘이네 라이티 치료도 제 또베 또베 상바제와 도움에 봐 줘나 랑 강기 체 니니 Rahimaye Bati, Teta told you somebody about Tonda Java Joro. So this is naturally the government to study Mixo the Rahim Tadu Maris Lada, in that the muso Rashi to Tongwa the muso nil Rashi is the Yoyoma. Carson muso goes to the toward the Senate and take a pendo maji and Tava doing it to the muso swinging Rashi to the Toya Tondalia in Sambo was that Dombalama Ye gets the career Chierova. Because that's your news language. I said that the James language in the mixol because he said, and these are his carriers. And the children in the country that the omitted to the young quad of Gombaland and Shuya.
At the bottom of page 199, there is, I should say, clarification being offered with regard to a critic's assertion, and the critics, seems to think that there is a contradiction, when you say that things do not exist intrinsically, but the emptiness of intrinsic reality is the final nature of things. So they think there's a contradiction between the two things. So here, the Pasankika mathematicians are saying that there is no contradiction in those two, statements. And as Geshe explained, that things such as visual forms and sounds, they exist conventionally, but they are not the final nature of themselves. The final nature of these phenomena is the emptiness of intrinsic reality, and that reality exists because by realizing it, we are able to attain nirvana and enlightenment, isn't it? So there is no contradiction to say that things are emptied of intrinsic reality, but things do exist conventionally. And that's where the critics are struggling. They're like, well, things are empty of intrinsic reality, how could they exist at all, right? So they think there is a contradiction, and here, as Geshe explained, they say, what, you really did not understand what has been stated by Nagarjuna in his fundamental treatise. Nagarjuna, and therefore you come up with this kind of notion that there is a contradiction between saying that things are emptied of intrinsic reality, but at the same time things do exist. Right? There is no such a contradiction. It's just your failings to understand what Nagarjuna was explaining all about. So Geshe said that about 2 pages are left here, so he thought he can just leave it hanging out here. So he would like to teach this next time. So next time, meaning actually next Sunday, so I should better make the announcement here. So this coming Sunday, we have no teaching because your translator will be at the commencement of his university, and he's a faculty marshal speaker, so he can't be at 2 places at the same time. But there is also clarification need to be offered that next Sunday is also happen to be Tsok day. Those who have the Tsok commitment, so Geshe Setala has just told me this morning that the Tsok, instead of, because there's no teaching, so we will do Tsok offering at 10:30. Okay, so those who have a Tsok commitment, you are welcome to the Tsok offerings. After the Tsok, then you can go home. Again, konda sanyima shuma de la again sungju de chitu mo nga labda la ke di zego chu ba ge nge di shuma de chigen slai ma ge da ko se de che ge in cho re do ge and shoga chu cha ga cho ta so ba I forgot to tell Geshe, he thought, what was I saying? And then there are more announcements to be made. Maybe I should make. Then again, the set out the motor shoot shows. So anyway, I take this opportunity to make some of the good news announcements. His Most Eminence Song Rinpoche will again visit us. So here is the schedule. We don't know what exactly he will be teaching, so you have to practice patience there. But we wanted to give you the schedule ahead of the time so that you can make your arrangements, right? Because schedule is more important, We live in America, I think, my footnote. Song Rinpoche will arrive here on the 25th of September. Okay, that's his arriving. On the 29th of the September, I think there is going to be solitary Yamantaka self-empowerment, right? Those who have received the solitary Yamantaka initiation, who have done the standard retreat, right? So you are welcome to participate in this solitary Yamantaka self-empowerment presided over by His Eminence Song Rinpoche. So that is the September 29th. Okay? The details will come soon near you. It will follow later, I think. September 30th, 30, will begin his teaching. So I have been told that Song Rinpoche will teach 2 sessions in the afternoon. Okay, no session in the morning. 2 sessions in the afternoon. Again, the details will come later on. So that means on September 30th, he will begin his teaching, and he will teach every day 2 sessions. Check with Geshe. I didn't say that. I'm just repeating. And his last teaching will finish on the 7th of October. Right. So from the end of September to the 7th of October, Song Rinpoche will be teaching every day 2 sessions in the afternoon. Means afternoon and evening. That's how the sessions are. Okay. So anyway, I think these details will be provided to you through the Yahoo group and whatever Mahu group, all the group list thing. By the way, I think, correct me if I got it wrong, I think I'm somehow on the Yahoo list, which is good. It says there's a talk on the 21st, which is Sunday, but it says Saturday. I don't know, things happened wrong. So it is a talk next Sunday. Okay. With that, we will stop there today, and we yield to you for your questions and observations, and
Okay. Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Thank you, Geshe. Just let me make sure that I got it right. Maybe how my mind sees it. Emptiness is imputed on the mode of the final nature of, or final nature is imputed on emptiness. Emptiness is imputed on the mode of existence of an object. The mode of existence of an object is imputed on the conventional object. The conventional object imputed on the parts and what have you. Am I seeing this correctly?
Oh, I see. How
I'm
that
just tracing it back, like what's imputed on what, so that it kind of
So-
simplifies
okay, I
why
think-
there's no intrinsic
I think I
reality.
got your main point. Okay, give me one more time. So what is imputed on what? You said
Okay,
a couple of
let's
things.
go.
So I want
Let's
to
see if
follow
it's right.
your...
Maybe it's wrong completely.
Yeah,
Who
no,
knows?
that's
But
okay.
let's
I'll
go
check
through
with
it.
him, but-
So let's say emptiness is imputed on the final nature, or maybe it's backwards. But either way,
Emptiness is the final nature.
is the final nature, but it is imputed. It's sitting on something. You see, it
Okay.
has to be
Okay,
imputed
so what
on
is
something.
imputed on? We will ask him, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna go through and see what we got right,
Right.
or what we got
Okay.
wrong.
Good.
So it's imputed on the mode of existence. That's how
Okay.
I hear it.
Okay.
And the mode of existence of something is imputed on the conventional something,
Okay.
whatever that is,
Okay.
apple, whatever
Yes,
it is.
yes, yes.
And the conventional object is then imputed on its own parts of and
Okay, sure. Okay,
parts. Of,
now I got
let's
it.
make sure we got.
Sure. Yes, I got it clear. The Moroccan show did this go again. Tanda Karasor Church, Tamja Toba Tazam Shigo again. She do Kalia, Damu, Taxa, Doctor, some of the thing we could do again. Already Kodun, the Digman Hakumundusa, and King Digmenas or NASA. That church Tamja Nilu Tardu says or again. Said that Tombani, Rangshin to the Tonga Sakari, what a Nilu Tardu di, Taxa di, and a church Tamja ki that Yudajo, what Tardu, Dilla Shish and Tower, Vessel again. Nilu Tardu, Taxa, Daxita Muslim again. That dene derivata Tanganto Namji Church Tamja Kunzo the Yola Sharwage, Tobata, De Yang Soso Daxi Sharwage, Tadi More Shichil Shana Yawara, that game Shichi Sharwage, Sugar Nilo de Taxa Daxi Chicharwage, Daxi di Daxe Gate, Kunzo Church Yungurwage, Kunzo Charwa, Kokore Yan talk about thousands on the Kore Daxi Yungurwage, that would do say Daxi Mama, what some Tanda Taka dig to your best again.
다다 대탱주 지도에서 데려와 배나 본반도 시작나 되게다 본반 다기다 본배 카드 샵도 샤그러와
네.
샤그르디 얘는 다다 대탱주 지도단다 본바스다 본바도 카드 샵 되지 본바데 시들 봤다 대가랑 샤는 뭐도 这呢，他开灯的多了这个下午这个，因为这个嘛是吧？
那嘞
对，当中这个嘛，
那
他就多边我下咱们写我听来的哇，
那
我的下午。
那是
伊那今天个别多边大家的个都他这绿的吧，你几块银是我是吧？
那嘞
他几块银是的咱呢，他几块银那特别绿的里呀，少结果我的绿我你都少结果是吧？
那么
你可以吃我就看这结果是吧？
那么
근데 다시고는 유지 요리 베세나
뭐.
다시고는 매라고라
那嘞
다시고는 매스데 다다 근데 요단데 개발 가는 유지도 가르쳐 그러세요 다 가이에서 다시 세마스기도 와
那是
가이에서 다시 세마세나 에네 페지르 다시 뭐 시대 시요가 샤우리티 페지르 로히 톱도 히워 가이에서나
那是
다 거기 드레지 다 다시 세마지 말아는 페지 거기 개발 제도 말아
那嘞
다시 세마 가려서는 내들 바닥도선 이거 딱 봐가 뒤 동원 시토고도네 다시 세마시라
那嘞
다 그걸 다 봐도 돈 시토고도네 다시 세마 많이 메시
那么
其实他把驴当那驴，他把烧脚嘛的，
那么
驴我驴的什么呢？给烧脚嘛的嘛，就是他什么都差嘛的，
那嘞
我就是说，
okay. So I got that all completely. I just want to still pursue your question more clearly again. That again, pena dira ba ke pumbal pesha ro again.
我的，
Ta mara sam ditang bza kana pumbe nilu thadu ti ta pumba ka sa ke rangshing maru la bo wa again.
我的，
Ta ya pumba khora ke ka sa to de shabshun to je ne ba chal pumba sming chita sha ro again. Ta di ko je di training ma di ka sa ngazo ina kunzo bu ke pumbe ming di cha ro again. Ta pumbe nilu thadu chung ro again. Rangshing maru ba di taksa dakshi ka la ta samdena ma ke pumba di pumbe nilu sha sa ke dakshi che.
我这些，
to de shabshun chu ne ba di pumba taksa ke dakshi ro che. Di de samdang go ro
我
kha.
这什么，这
Really?
这，
No, sir. No, sir. I just want to make sure that understood and get clear answer. Geshe said, yeah, you're kind of in the right direction in that if we take a pot or a vase as an example, right, Pumba, the final nature of the pot is its basis or the labeling basis is the pot itself, right, the pot, right? And the pot itself, in a sense, is a label onto that characteristics of the pot, right? In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the pot is defined as a container that has the brim, right, the mouth, and the belly part, and the stand thing, right? There's a whole definition of what pot is. So based upon those characteristics of the vase, right, we give the name vase or the pot, right? So we can see the labeling at, if you will, the two levels, right? Pot is something that's labeled onto that fulfills that characteristics. And the pot itself is kind of the basis for the emptiness of the pot. Okay, now I'm going to come back to hold for a second before I lose all the train of thought Geshe said. So Prasangika Madhyamikans are saying that this is how everything is merely labeled, right? In the case of a pot is nothing but simply a label given onto that basis of labeling, which is the pot characteristics. Okay. Now you cannot look for the pot. Okay, where is the pot? Is it the brim of the pot? Is it the belly of the pot? Is it the center of the pot? Because if you do that kind of a ultimate rational analysis, you are not going to find the pot. Okay, and but that doesn't mean pot doesn't exist. It's just a label onto that basis. And then this whole kind of a conversation comes between, is there a difference between, let's say, labeling snake a snake and a fake snake a snake, right? Because in terms of labeling, according to Prasangika, it's exactly the same thing. There should not be any difference between a coiled rope that looks like a snake, and we call that a snake, and the real snake, right, that's called a snake. In terms of labeling, it should exactly be the same thing. But then there's a difference between the real and the fake, right? The real snake is going to bite you, but the fake snake is not going to do anything. Okay? And so people make the argument, so how can it be? If in terms of labeling, it's exactly the same thing, yet there is a difference between real and the fake one, right? And that's why some people think that there has to be something called a valid basis of imputation. Dakshi Sangma, right? And then we say, okay, what is a valid basis of imputation? Just tell us, right? We kind of nudge it, right? Then they say, you know what? I think there has to be something from each side. There has to be something, right? That's what they end up saying, right? I think there has to be something there. It has to be. So which for the Prasangikas, no. Then it becomes intrinsic reality. Nothing should exist from that side. And so for Prasangika, the difference between the real snake, fake snake, labeling is when you give the label snake onto something that can fulfill the function of being a snake, right? That is a real snake. And you give the label snake to something that looks like a snake, does not have the ability to perform as a snake function, then it is the fake snake, Anyway, yeah.
Geshe is saying that emptiness is imputed on the conventional object, the conventional snake.
Yes.
But given that we just spent a good hour distinguishing between nature, the nature versus like the nature of fire being heat or what have you, versus the nature of how it exists, that kind of nature. Wouldn't it make sense that emptiness is imputed on its mode of existence of the object and not the conventional object? Does it make sense that?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I got that clear. Thank you. Around this is what again, Tanda Yangju Mutun Xue 지단에 답변은 동반이 있어로 딱 쳐드면 내로 타도 저러 봐게 뒤에 그 닥시 뒤에 딱 군접에 쳐질 다그 얼마서 그렇게 닥시 사서 들어가게 다 이내 뭐라 섬로단데 되기 먼저 랑신 세겐데 딱 고대 망보sun 거 봐게 랑신 시대 지단기 탄 군접에 랑신 시고라 메차바 랑신디 고 차바 랑시로 봐게 그래서 타도 말와 이 랑신 타도 세디 딱 랑을 먼저 랑신 타도 라고 봐게 제가 메차바 랑신디 고 메기 첼레질 때에 딱고 메 랑신디 식다고 봐게 이내 메기 니루 타도디 메 첼레 차바들 딱 군접에 쳐를 따오 많이 저 봐게 메 코랑기 니루 뭐마셔로 받아 가서 볼때 두다저로 봐 다가디 아니 가서 닥실 뮤에진 디톨이야 안동반이 다가서 메기닐로 따버제 두시 여와시는 디고 나서로 봐게 아니 가서 메코란달에 메 동이셔도 고지
메다 메 사완이도 고예메로 가가치야 말와 다코 체이시네 엔 코가 다 랑이 타도도 가르쳐 아니 메데마 랑원 메바세난다 아니 메데마 메바세다 어디 타도 샤고로 와 가서 타도 샤고 그래서 다들 어디 너서 너희 집 거내로 타도 샤도고 뭐 조상 가가래 돼요 다그 돈이도 리바시 딱선제 도 시험도 자네 그 먼저 나다나 이거 비게 링링도 그런 거 두도 매 샤고로 어디 샤는데 좀다 제 말에 매일 내로 타도 있는 어디라고 다 내로 타도 영조제야 매번 지금 다들 매 랑시 차와디 니나 영조디 차와디 매 랑시 타도 그래도 도 랑시 제야요 다 매랑시 매 또서네 다 드네 봐니 매 내로 제야요 말 타도 레사라 그래서
다게 메기 다게 차와디 군접 랑시 임바다 메 랑원에 마루보다 고 타도 랑시 임바다 고 야치고도 오게 다네 비게 닥시죠 와게 닥시들 타데니 요르베서 바나 가서 남주기 메기 내로 타도스데 메데 닥시신 데 내로 타도 랍당을 저거로 와. 다음에 삼바 메 차베랑 신사저로 그쪽은 내로데 고 메코라기 달샤로 와게. 다메 랑싱이 마로 내로 타도데 메 니주저로 와게. 니주 뭐마저로 와. 디 닥실을 전 디가리아 아니 가서 랑신 루머 스타 야와신 디고 그래서 다 닥시 야와치고 되게. 니루니다 하고 그러게. 닥시 샤서.
닥시도 되래. 그 메셔나 메 사 냠도 셔는 디고 다 메 사와니 소소 비야요 말와.
나리.
그래서 닥시 가르세다 디 돈이디 닥시도 가르세는 메티야 그러와. 메티야. 닥시도 이로서 셔다샤 말와.
No. So I was trying my best to be able to get the distinction as you were trying to make, which I thought I understood, because you were saying, maybe first you should check with I understood, so in terms of fire, we can talk about two types of nature. There's a conventional nature, fire is hot, right? And there's the ultimate nature, fire is empty of intrinsic reality, right? And you understood the distinction between those two. I said, that's not the question. The question is, what is the basis for the fires, the conventional nature, which is the heat, whatever, right? And what's the basis for the ultimate nature of the fire? And is it other than the fire itself, right? Is there something, the mode of existence of the fire? That's what you said, right? The modes of the existence of the fire. Didn't you say that?
Yeah, but I'm talking about what emptiness is imputed on.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
On the conventional object or on the mode of existence of the conventional object?
Yes, yeah, I was trying to get that distinction to Geshe, and Geshe's answer is that emptiness of the fire is actually imputed onto the fire itself, so the conventional basis. And that was his answer. Okay.
근데 지선 디스고 단다 매랑시 매베디 매 니루랑 타도 레데라데 신나 매랑시 매베 니루 레고 말봐 매랑시 매베 코라 영조 그 니루 거다 동바지 사 샤고라 셰다다 랑시 매 데바트베 동아데 인 매 니루 타도 예바데 지동 원에서 로에 다샤 뭐 유코는 원도 줘야 말봐 셰다 디시다 동바지 돈이 쇼기 샤고라 어다데 셔도도 동바지 사 샤고라 어제디 매로 이 코나 치기서 근데 코다 가르서는 코도 배다 와자래 근데 또 그러냐 찍사고라
no. So Geshe is explaining that if you look at the conventional nature of fire being hot or heat, okay, and that is the conventional nature of the fire, but then that is not the ultimate nature of the fire, because if we analyze it, so we know this deeper truth, so to speak, right? So that deeper truth, the emptiness of intrinsic reality of the fire, is its final nature. But that emptiness of the intrinsic reality of the fire is its final nature, but it's not the final nature of the emptiness of the of the intrinsic reality of the fire itself, because we have to talk about the emptiness of the emptiness again, right? So that's how we talk about 18 emptinesses, isn't it? Just like the fire is merely labeled, so is its emptiness as well. Its emptiness itself is empty of intrinsic reality, which is the emptiness of the emptiness, right? Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
Through the teaching, I think Geshe mentioned that even the existence of Dharma is conventional. Just want to clarify, the reason for this is it's still subject to the law of relativity, meaning we still have to have a conceptual framework to define Dharma.
Can you repeat it one more time? I think I must have missed a word somewhere there. I didn't understand completely. So
the existence of Dharma.
Karma, okay.
Dharma.
Oh, Dharma, yes.
Dharma. Is Dharma.
Yes.
It's also conventional.
Yes.
So is a reason, is it because it is still subject to law of relativity, meaning we still have to have a conceptual framework?
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, sure. Morangi, when you say Dharma, you mean Dharma as a spirituality, right? Not Dharma as existence, right? Teaching. Okay, teaching. Good. Okay, good. Yeah. Da Morangi shwe di this go again. Da nganzo chö did it again. Da shiru chö de marda chidang chö. Oh, the teaching the what chö de. Chö de ya ne karso gore ta rangshing ki mandu bores labdu kan la ba ge ye tongda kosa de ane chö de ta pen chö ne lu she de kan ya ta chik de she ya da tok ba da mangu che ten de go ba ge di jumjen chen chö teaching de ya ba ge rangshing mandu bores samlo ta dine je le go ba ko tanye de yo rangshing de yo mar se de ba ge
예. 그 최시야 등서 최시야 지거라. 어 되리고 다 근데 최시야 되 농하고 다 같이 지금 저와 지금 쉬어로 와. 되게 되다 그래 지금 다가는 쉬어봐 다 샤가야 미주 딩마도 최시야 가래도 제도는 거 이해야 돼요 말아. 지금 샤고라.
So Geshe is saying that when we think of Dharma in terms of teaching or practice, right? That also exists conventionally and contingent upon a number of its parts, right? It does not exist intrinsically. And in terms of like our practice, we can think about how our whole body, speech, and mind involved in that, right? So yes, because of that, Quran this something again teaching the again. The 10 day kumjel chen any kalsor tanya the yoba the rangshing mandu again. Something to go so again. 10 day in kumjel again. And tanya the yoba the rangshing mandu.
돈이 다 쓰이나 다 되게 요즘 최답지 러시 마저비 차로와
no.
타이도 요모데 랑올링 그 쓰지요 뭐 지구가 다 쉬어졌는데 어제 양해 등에 가와져서 체지야요
당연히 되게 니도 조금 매졌으면 되게 뭐라서 지왔단다 제로와 그래서 지와도 야고 랍도 보면 동안 가서 아주 최탐제 때는 따와 인자 랑시 만두르스 쓰이고 거라게 다 되게 경기 최탐제 니루 디로와게 규제 가를 마든 슬라버와게 그래서 뛰어서 땡요 말로 거라게 어떻게 조금 매졌어 와게 가서나 텐데 레시라 와야게 야 규제를 땡요 말시라 와게 야 퍼리추리 말시라 와 지도가로 딱 거와 땡베에서 마덴베에서 되게 조금 매졌어 와 다들 콘서 랍도 보면 동하게
어디 카베 지바데 다 제단데 바마 메랑시메바데 텐데로와
나오
메랑시메바데 그 처제인데 메를 되고와
나오
다 되게 뜨면 세야디 가르스 그 랑시 예바드 처제인도 뭐로와 메랑시메 예바드 처제인도 처제면데 메랑시메바데 용고 말와
라레
맞도 그 랑시메 사드 가이도가 요 말와 당메 강가 랑시메 그 랑시메와 랑시 예바드 랑시메와 샤워세 되게 되고
Quran 랑시라 털로 임바데 롱스 I was trying to sort of add a little more to that, where maybe that question is coming from, because, often we say that, nothing exists intrinsically because everything exists dependently, right? Dependent arising or relativity, right? Is part of that is our big reason why nothing exists, including teaching, yeah? So maybe I thought part of your question is coming because I don't read your mind, I just assume, could be, because earlier we said that the emptiness being the final nature of thing is not contingent upon, right? Those conditions, right? It's not contingent upon cause and effect relationship. It's not contingent upon the law of relativity, right? So that seems kind of confusing, right? Emptiness as the final nature of reality is not contingent upon all those conditions, okay? But all things that we talk about that exist, it exists conventionally, and it doesn't exist intrinsically either because of those different levels of the dependent arising, right? Dependent arising as cause and effect relationship, dependent arising in terms of relativity, dependent arising in terms of conceptual imputation. Yeah. Nice. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead. Can you give? Yeah, to you. Wait a minute. After that, we will come. Okay. First, Jim, and then send the mic to her, right? Yeah.
Okay, so we talk about two levels, ultimate and conventional.
Yes.
But in reference to the term exists or existent,
yes,
is it fair to say that the term existent can only always actually refers to conventional? Mm-hmm. Whenever you can only use the word exists in reference to conventional. Because ultimate from Prasangika is a negative, right? It's a mere absence of intrinsic existence.
Sure. Okay.
So that is not a thing that can be said to exist in any other way than simply having a conventional label.
Or talk about it in negative terms, right?
So to use the word existent, it's always conventional.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that came through clearly. Quran ki kandi shwe di shugor da tanda nganze khar sogor da nilu da mason ne da ngo sha de kal kunzo be ngo je da tadu ngo sha gor wa ge ya je de kan ya da tanda nganze namju ki chi gi yö ba se jor wa ge yö ba se di existence se di samlo tangsa di kunzo de yö ba chi go jor samlo go 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 ra sa wa ge tadu ga nilu de la ge tadu ga nilu de yö ba se go go me do kan san tadu nilu de tanda nganzo oma tenjubo lul chebe ino ko megasha gorwa ke sedo kal ko chi res lab to go maro ko chi gagsi si kyam ro ke chi tongba chi ke che ma de yo res lab ka to go maro che da yoba se ki ko den di tanye di yoba ran ko de ro ke ta tongba nye se di ko yo res ke de me ko tongba chi se go ke ran shin jube tongba ina ka tongba chi se de ka la din de chi ko alen di go ro sa ta
다 가도 돈이 또 있는데 다들 그게 돈이 많이 가는 게 뭔가 저러 와. 다 가도 뒤뒤 짜들이 그래서 돈이 그래 또왜 내가 라 그래 가자 그제 내 제발 좀 다 민도 서도 동상 다 가는 샤가 마도 다고 러시 민도 대시어 서면 인들로 셔다 짠지 맞지 다 가나 샤고 그러.
그래.
근데 디 돈이 예바 디 도고 뭐다 돈이 도 로저로 디 돈이 또 말와. 그래. जोल को तवारी तुम तो दे दे मारवा तका यार जब यार यार लो ene toni yeba tin to da jogo ma de ngusum jo to yeba ngusum yure se do
Ale long so.
ene shin to in toni seme jobsa na ene toni yeba da pomba yeba ni to ga le jigwa de ro da toni 차버려 돼 그런 제제 뭐로 다 그 여바 차버려 그러
Lare.
제제 잡는 여바 pomba yeba da toni yeba jigwa jigwa
Lots. Geshe said that, yes, when we use the word existence, right, I think in a general sense, we take it to mean conventional existence, right? Things exist conventionally. But at the same time, as you said, when we talk about the emptiness as the final nature, right, it's always talked in terms of negative terms, right? It's absence of something. And, but that absence of something does exist. The issue is that when you realize that absence of intrinsic reality, of emptiness non-conceptually, even for that mind does not see that emptiness as existent. It simply, right, experiences the absence of something, isn't it? So when you come out of that meditative state, right, then you realize that things are empty of intrinsic reality. That does exist, So I think in a generic sense, the term existence, we better understand as conventional existence,
this is the zahi diction la yusa pitere toni khanje to sa de ta ne toni yoba de ta ne rogo ya ma le se ki de ngongju de ya ta sa toni ngusu sa to sa de ta en ta gi tong chang de to sa de lam sa sha ma re ti sha de na ta ti chi song de yo de me se de je ba tan xiu ma le se ba ta rong yu ko yo ba se me to do re
in a text called Gyeltsen, it's a commentary on the fundamental wisdom. It is said that once you realize emptiness non-conceptually, right, understand it, then there is no need for any other reason to establish the existence of emptiness for you. Because in your everyday life, right, there's so many affirmation of that it does exist. Because your relationship with the world, right, it always manifests, shows that's the absence of intrinsic reality. So there's evidence of its existence everywhere. We don't need any other reason to establish that it does exist. Yeah. Oh, yes, now you need a question. Could you send the mic here? Yeah, thank you.
I'm just wondering if this is within the right path.
Okay.
Meditative awareness, free of mental turbulence, in and itself seems to manifest its true nature.
Can you explain it one more time? You said, what is in the path? When we are meditating on the awareness of what? Mental turbulence, what do you mean?
The path to enlightenment.
Okay, when we are being aware of the path to enlightenment.
Well, the path to enlightenment itself appears, say. So when we are in a meditative state,
Yes.
of just pure awareness, free of all the mental turbulence, just this mental seems to manifest itself
As what?
intrinsic reality.
Okay, check with me. This is what I understood you say. Okay. When we are cultivating path, meditating on the path, right, path to enlightenment, okay, all this mental turbulence, we are aware of that, whatever it is, turbulence. And then you said our mind itself manifests as intrinsic reality. What do you mean?
Because of its own nature, when we let it settle, free of all this turbulence, it seems to manifest itself.
Are you saying that realization of the nature of the mind is such intrinsic reality, or you're saying that we do realize the nature of the mind in that mode? I don't know. What's your real question here?
That we do realize the true nature when it does, when we're just consciously aware without the mental chatter.
Okay. The mona chiba de gen sebe chere chag din de rusla ge dwa ta nganzo ka so lam nyam len che ro ge kom ja ba yin de ka la sa ta di ngen di sig me zo da nyu mo la so ba tok ba ro ge sa sing de ge di ma ka ko ya chi mo shi be cha sha ro wa chi de ka la ya ane ta same Quran kita rangshin de mason rawage de yangun de june rawa ane rangshin de hako yung rawa sta ina mara same rangshin de ya rangshin dubo jala bi rawage kujima de rawage this ane hako yung mara sa same Quran kita nelu rawa ko rangshin de dubo de yang za hako yung mara so ta kom na nyen jo nyam ne chidu
ale nyame chi tan da kar se
ka nyomo ko to pa nam da de shiwa cha cha rawage same ki ko chi rangshin de mason ya sever ngun de rawage inde same ki rangshin ngun de jo de ta 뭐라 치와다 당기면 도와게 다디 뭐기 샘기 네루 터도 랑신 조벌 진고 도와게
ale ta gaje 가데다 니모 디데 파샤서는 다도 쓸디 녀고 도되게 이다 쓸고라 갑다지 아니 누구라 다 디디 이 샘기 네루 거기에 지레지레
라요 샘 네루를 등아서 통투고 말을 해서 공원도 유네로 봐게
ale
근데 네루 줘 샘데 땅원에 요 말을 쓰고서 그다 야 랑신 조벌 나와셔 거서 봐게 네루 봐게
요디 शेते गंदु नंदे गंगा रही ठवानंग गोरवा
नाउ
शेते नया दा नुबिनिति यिमेदा दा ननि मिदु से आई दोवा
नाउ
कजे दा समुद्र दिखो गरबेना सिम से लादे जाना एदे बे फाजो बे दोदो रुजी शागदो आस्ता शागोरवा
라레
दा सिम से जाना सिम कोलिया सिम 중다 송대신 인데 뭔가 시 디셔 줘지버 그 도도 요마라 다 동도 세는 요마라
라레
시라지 시드네 강가 때데 비찹스 로히 마르 찹스 기세데 가지 너도 너지 나히오 데밍데 요마라 어떻게 쓰오다
This is what Geshe said. Yes, we cultivate the path to enlightenment, and let's say all this mental chattering and all these conceptual thoughts kind of dissipate, and then we're able to maybe experience kind of a manifestation of the nature of the mind. But somewhere there, if we somehow still feel it is as if that nature is a very fixed entity, right? Sort of solidly there, as if it's very real in a sense. Then I think we're still really not getting the final nature of the mind. Because when we think mind, looks like it is kind of an object or a fixed entity, isn't it? It's just a one thing. But in reality, mind is a world in itself, right? We talk about different types of consciousness. We can talk about different types of mental factors, right? It's a combination of many things, right, that constitute what mind is. There is no such thing as one mind, right, fixed entity. Okay? So even in our meditation, if at the end of our practice and awareness, we feel like, okay, everything has come down, and now I can see the clear nature of the mind, but then that nature is kind of a fixed entity, then we're still missing the point. We're not getting at the final nature of the mind. Okay. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but at least some kind of clarification there. Okay, I'll go the question one more. Okay, back at the...
Geshe for your teachings. I've been struggling with a question on emptiness for a long time, and I want to try to understand if what I understood today. I want to check with Geshe
Sure.
what I understood today.
Yes.
Is correct, or am I still in the wrong? So when the Prasangika say that everything exists as merely labeled, when you just keep that sentence, based on that sentence only, whether you have a rope or a snake, they're both equal. They're just a label, by terms, they're a concept. But one, is biting and you can die from it. Yes. The other is harmless.
Yes.
So does the distinction depend then, the distinction between the rope and the real snake, does it depend then on dependent arising? And what I mean by that is that, do we conceptually create the possibility that one will bite, that the snake, will bite, and that the rope, we can make knots on it? And so if that's the case, we created the concept that the valid basis of imputation for the snake is the fact that it can bite, and for the rope, it's the fact that it can we make knots with it.
Yes.
But just to validate that point, is that if this is something that was created conceptually, we could have very well conceptually created the fact that the rope can bite. And then in that case, had we used the rope as a basis of imputation, that this rope can bite, then
It should bite.
it should bite.
I got it. Yeah.
You see where I'm getting at?
Yeah. Yes, I got your point
Okay.
clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Korangi kandi shwe di dire ke ta Korang gyun ringbo chine tongba ni kol samro stanga chi ge sa ro ke ta tiring king gi jashe gyun ma di shi sha na Koragi kwar ba de lön do men de chik sro na sa ro ke je de ta oma ten yu be lo chi de kal chue tham je tok pe tak sam res le go ro sa ke je da ta dan de la de gi gen so mo ne shin ane takral tu ta ba da tu ta ba ni ke ba ke ma chi ba ji ni ro song ro ke 다 이네 개바드 가르쳐 주용 엄마 되게 소적으로 두던 거로 하게 뭐 사과 되게 기디기 젤레디 요 말아 던지는 바로 봐 제사 딘데기 개바드야로 하게 지금 소적으로 지금 소적도 말로 하게 대야 먼저 똑바 쉬셔 주셔로 해서 하게 그 똑바 따점 저로 똑바 쉬셔 주로 하게 주디 공부 소적으로 해서 된 소적이 해서로 봐 계세 대 똑바 쉬어 버지 이베 이나로 봐 대용 오버 니줄 매베 이나서 거로 하게 이베 이나 안에 탁다 될래 먼저 똑바로 써야 들어가. 그 소잡이 와서는 소잡국으로 왔어. 그러게. 그냥 그 소잡국이 말하게. 그래서 다디 야와로 돼요 말하게. 다디 차고서 똑바로 따와 단다 이임바질라 찌기 얘네 주기 젤레디 제윤 거를 와. 젤레 제바 돼 똑바로 써야 이나로 와게. 한 먼저 써야 통고서 와게. 다디 게 이제 자시 좀 하게. 당 먼저 똑바로 따자면 똑바로 써야 매라야 돼. 이제 차고서 와게.
네, 다디 다 저하고는 저래. 해야 돼. 디 개발 지역으로 세워라다. takba dhudaba dhugul tokpe takba takzu kheba jiye yo ma dhise nahi gun meba chikpa yisi song yorwa ina tanyi di chawashimi kheba ji ngusumdi dhugu yorwa tati tuyat kare nahi gun si dhugu yorwa nahi gun chum lagu bada nahi tsema yimisi pechi da sungchuga nahi tsema yimisi taki kheba kanyisa nahi tsema sedi zangna pechi tokpa da 나히인가 수 너무 용가서 뭐 똑바로 다선 장자 레그먼도 동도시고
랑교비기 삼을당다로
어디서 나 로지 마다지도
어제도
라마스요 와 어디서 너도 롱 히야도 쓰고다 라마도 숨지도 줘라 어디서 다트 말스탑디지 다 나이 세와서 마샤나 에네 류고다
야와체 마싱을
야와체부터 샤라다 류고기 소자고 지부디 소자고 뭐 가르쳐서 거기 또부터 아직고 지겨래. 개발 주주 가려서 랍토고요 말아. 그래서 랍에서 다 다기세마 예메세다는 비지때 내와줘요. 다기세마 예메세다는요. 다기군이 예시백 통스카 말이스. 거기 또베 파 딱두서 시들 비기 지레서 따운디다. 또베 따는 신코는 그런 비기 들려 따니 누바디시네 또베 따는 시 그런 게 자와시거든요. 이거 나기 세마샤리스. 그봐. 다그 따바다는데 그 자마지나 나기 세마요 말이스.
This is what Geshe said. I mean, you're really asking a very important question here. And according to Prasangika Madhyamigins, in terms of the way we label, right, things, whether we label a fake snake as snake, or the real snake is a snake, is exactly the same thing. They said there should not be any difference, right? Both being merely labeled by terms and concepts. That being said, we know there's still a difference between real snake and the fake snake, right? The real snake is going to bite you, poison you, but the fake snake is not going to be able to do that, right? So where this difference come from, right? Is this just our own mental fabrication or creation, or there is something else going on, right? And so this is where, as we talked about before, some scholars, they think that now we have to talk about something called a valid basis of imputation, right? One of them constitutes the valid basis of imputation, and other does not, right? That's why the one that constitutes a valid basis to be labeled as snake performs the function of a snake. The one that does not have a valid basis does not perform, right? So now when we try to poke into that, okay, that sounds like an interesting one. What is a valid basis of imputation? What does that exactly mean? So then many scholars come to think that there's something, right? You are labeling from one side, subjective point of view, but there's maybe teeny-weeny bit something there, right? Okay. But for the Prasangikas, there should not be any teeny weeny thing from the side of the phenomenon, because then that doesn't work. Okay, and so whether or not how we make the distance, that's a very the difficulty or the challenge we have is whatever that basis is, if that basis is able to perform certain function of a snake, right, then we consider that as a valid basis. And something that looks like a snake but does not have the capability, the potency to perform as a snake, so we consider that as non-valid basis of imputation. Okay? So that's but still struggling with that. Okay? So it's not just a simply mental fabrication. Otherwise, as you pointed out, right, if you can think of the fake snake can bite us someday, then it should bite us. But that's not just creation of the mind. Yeah.
So there is something more.
There's something more. Yes.
But the Prasangika says there is nothing from the side of the phenomena of the object.
Right. But then what is that?
But yet there is something more. So
right.
So what is that something more?
Yes. The Quran this was chesangin the umatenju be studio galia and dakshi ngwe ne chhe khan yoma rangwen ne roba ke samne to ba ta sa res la roba ke ta to ba ta sa re labgi la and chu ngoma da chu juma de ke bar shago roba ke ko studio gala ta 케바디 가레시 산 샤고라로 dak시면에 메르와게 제가 샤가로 저다디 하고 싶이 사대 거라게 그러와 그래서 똑바 쇠샤제는 딱 주주마 되게 소잡그래서는 소잡고 다디 말어와게 똑바 강소 말어와게
똑바 소데스데 데르와 똑바 소거데 똑바 송게 똑바 강가 똑바 동문 미리다 동문 템버스 똑바 강가 찍바 말어와요 그러와 똑바 주리세게 똑바디 똑바 세디 거 류군데 되더와 다 가자 류군 타타바 뒤에서 로드 녹히지래 돼요.
맞아요. 또 딱딱 찍어야 돼. 찍으러 오셔.
로코는 그 비게 가르사 세진 토모도를 해봐도.
No. Maybe the one way to look at that, Geshe says, that's a very difficult, even for us to be able to explain precisely what is that Prasangika is getting at. The only thing they say is that which can perform the function of a snake in this particular case is a valid basis to be labeled a snake, and that which cannot is not a valid basis. But maybe one way to look at that distinction is even though, in terms of just being labeled as a snake is exactly the same thing, right? There's no difference. But the difference in terms of the perception, labeling a coiled rope or the fake snake is a wrong perception, right? Lokta. It's not a valid perception. But the labeling that snake as a snake is a valid perception. So maybe we have to go back to check with valid perception versus non-valid perception or the wrong perceptions, right? Labeling is the same, but in one case, it's a distorted perception, right? Fake snake, we say it's a snake, but it isn't, So maybe that's one way to look at it.
Maybe valid basis we could just say valid basis doesn't mean it's intrinsic basis.
What?
Valid basis.
Yes, it doesn't mean intrinsic basis, right? Yeah, right. But then we're trying to. I think maybe that's what it is. Okay, that's my footnote. I mean, I'm struggling with that. Right? We say, okay, so then where's the difference? Where's the valid basis? I'm still trying to find something there, right? That's my ignorance, right? Because there should not be intrinsic reality out there to point at. But that's how I'm habituated. I feel like there must be something, real snake. Show me the real snake. Show me the tongue. Right? I'm kind of looking at it. So maybe that's my own ignorance. Given that, that's what I'm thinking. The deal again that dakshi de mona lab nishi de ko Russian do dakshi te yo mara wa so tang ana zo king somebody pen ngara pe sha bro wa gen dangsin lo komdi che bo ge ta chu ngo ma de ka ba do ta che chi te da ka ni pa zu zu sa zu do de ngare gi da ko komshi gi cha de gu jo wa ga dangsin lo wa gen no ta wa zam li ya ta yi chi go ma yang ko chi che ga ro go wa ge chu ngo ma de ka ba do lan gen
그래서 다들 류도 세지 통지 향말 류문에 예나
no
대가나 다 류레서 다 근데 딜시는다 유의 류과다 강화도 쓰이는 이 류하고 말아 어디 또 이디 대가나 샤고서 다 대가 파 넣죠 말시
Geshe say, yeah, this is where really subtle becomes right. Even if we see a real snake and we recognize a real snake, just accept it, that's a snake. Now don't analyze it like, okay, you are a real snake, which is the real you, right? In the part of a snake, there is nothing to be found about. That's the, that's the issue, Just accept that's a real snake. Stay away, don't get bitten by it. But if you're like, okay, I want to find the real snake, is the head or the tail or the middle section, right? There isn't one, Yeah. Oh yes, Jim. Yeah.
It seems to me that this is still incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
It brings up the question for me, has Buddhism definitively determined
Mm-hmm.
that there's really nothing out there?
Objectively, you mean, right?
Yeah, it sounds
Okay.
like this is falling short of answering the question,
Mm-hmm.
is there really not anything out there that you're imputing on?
Mm-hmm.
That question has not been answered.
Mm-hmm.
Has Buddhism determined that there really is nothing at all that you're imputing?
When you say there really is nothing, means nothing that exists completely independent, objectively. Is that what you mean? Or
As he's saying, there's your imputation and then there's a valid basis.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying it's unacceptable in prasangika to have even a smidgen of anything
Mm-hmm.
that's the valid basis.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why is that unacceptable in prasangika? And has
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism fully determined that there's nothing there that you're imputing on?
Alright. Kurang ta kan di so gen dan ko sa kan ga lo da di ton da de ma shi jan cha ko ko kha bo chai ji kha ri studio kan la pe na nang be shu ne ta ko ta wa ge ta zhao de ma san de ba ge che tam je ta ba da zan ji la bin go ro ba ge studio kan la pe ta pa yu ge ngo ro ba ge ha ji a yo ma se ta ya ja da ba che ne ro ba ge che de ni ji che di men sa ta nga zo pe na benam기 가장기 니까나로 왔다. 우마 텐주버를 전 닥시상마서 게 시고 말하게. 마셔도 가르래라고 그러게. 거다 닥시상마 마셔야 돼. 우마 텐주버 그러게. 아 최단다 자자 야다만 낭배 쉬어날. 피게 파낭와들로 와. 하야 매버 자자 야다만 타 쉬어내려 와. 아 디네즈디 차 요요 말서 와. 디 차면은 차 그러게.
그 다르기 가졌어.
아마 데디로 앞에나 다 유금 원스 라는 양 얘기지 되게 그 제프로도 오게 다 상마 똑베스요 왜냐 그 유판한 거를 와게 카파 시대에는 가에 매버지로 와게 자식 야다면 다 쳐야 돼요 라스라이저로 와게
맞아요.
바정어들
대들에 다 가서 유원의 매서 유원의 매바데 가르세나 제세월다. 그게 다 갔다 있는데 매는 가는 되게 그게 통하죠 봐. 어디 강사 말이데 라고 말와. 라고 말디. 딱꼭 많이 있는 다 가리는 지시야데 또 받기지 레샤서 어디 가는 뒤 거치비시는 뭐 이제 그 유원의 연애는 영제 때는 이는 고식 파선식 니에고 그러. 어디 니야베요 말이스. 다 띵게만 디스카르사 대부분 샤고케는 버세요. 아기니마. 게니메 딘데송스 펜다 마이도는 마이도 사모 다 샤고 그랬어. 마이 가도 되는 바 가도 간 바인데 파 도죠 말이스.
맞아.
예 니마테 그 겐제다 오마케 바이스 그러. 예베마 겐제 파지케 바이스. 그러니까 뭐 이치 봐도 그래 되죠. 어제다 돈다다 랑오는 메세야 될라. 그 통화들 야들이 민두라고 말봐. 딱 보면 매버들 이는 그런 메시.
Geshe said that Prasangika Madhyamikas accept all the things that we experience, right? Everything that exists, that's accepted, right? The whole thing when they're saying that there's nothing out there, what it means is that if we are in search of out there as being existing something in or of itself, right, intrinsically, then there's no such thing. That's 100%, right? They're sure about it. But there are things out there, right, in a sense that, but those are contingent upon our own experiences and subjective perceptions as well. And Geshe tells this story of one of the great, teachers of Drepung, Shakwa Khenrim, which I remember meeting him once. He passed away. He's considered as a very highly, one of the best experts in the Madhyamika philosophy. So he said that, as people, he said, when we see buffaloes in India, right, as soon as you recognize these are the real valid buffaloes, right, he said, leave it there. Don't further analyze it, like, okay, which one is the buffalo, the horn or the mouth or the nose, right? He said, just accept as it is, So when Prasangika says, or the Buddhist says, nothing out there, that is like, without contingent upon, right? Terms, concept, labels, perception, experiences, is nothing out there. Yeah, that's the meaning. Yes. Sure.
When you're talking about the fake
Yes.
and the real,
Yes.
at a certain place, isn't the whole thing an illusion?
Yeah. Kwarang this again. That and then the nilu she you do can la again. And it sometimes so get nilu ye the me the yang yije che ma je ke ji shi go again. And mango che yang the shi go samje lo gyuma res la again. So do kan yak ko me ba war she go again. So then the ke je kar she go so okay.
Zumba
Gyuma.
se da zumba
No.
Gyuma ale Gyuma se this go da gyuma se the ka se no no shi me ba da gyuma de se go ro
No.
me ji gyuma ke chi de de thong a ji de yo ro
No.
ta thong ya de lang thong ya mo bo de in de ta ma de lang ma ba se da de no ya no hi yo ma se ji me ji ko ta ne me yi ji wa ba de se go ba
So with this, I think I'll take the liberty to stop there. I think going up. So Geshe said, with regards to what you said, illusion, right? That's a good concept in the sense that things are not necessarily the way they appear to us. There is a disparity between how they appear to us and how they actually exist. If we are at a magic show, we are not saying that, wow, there's nothing happening here. While magician is playing the tricks, horses and elephants, we see that, we enjoy it, right? But they appear as horses and elephants, but they aren't horses and elephants, So just like that, when we say all things are just an illusion, we know things do exist conventionally, but the way they appear to us and the way they actually exist are big difference, So that's the nature of illusion. So thank you very much for wonderful questions and everything. We'll stop there today. So next Sunday, just talk at 10:30, no teaching. Kange Lode, Dimye, Jinja, Ninda, Namda, Rosebe, Jinye, Dungu, Geshe, Seje, Nije, Tuga, Lebomze, Kanda, Sebe, Zara, Mendon, Dunge, Gizebe, Dozo, Gula, Buje, Daze, Yela, Tuju, Doda, Jero, Nyumo, Nilo, Leje, Chado, Jeze, Marie, Muse, Dunge, Nyuo, Jinye, Jeze, Radina, Dene, Daje, Yende, Lunzo, Geze, Dubu, Chuda, Chuda, Chuni, Kalu Muse Jambe Yangla de Omara Bazana Omara Bazana de Zenden Kye Kera Vese Ye Dalu Timo Mimba Rasene Kada Tenju Nawa Zendo Zo Lode Gyazu Ushun Pega De Kesan Pumbe Chudo Mimba Shen Tenba Zela Wando Tanye Chukun Jala Sowan De Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text symbolic of us seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance, you who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri, Om Arabaza Nadi. O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate beings, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lobsang Tenzing Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Nhật quang lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng thanh thọ nghiệp. Nghiệp báo, gươm trí tuệ. Ngài an trụ nơi thập địa Pháp Vân, báu thân Ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tướng hảo Như Lai, đê đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù sư lợi, cúi xin Ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi, con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, ban pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh, được trí sáng con thâm nhập nghĩa màu, pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Đản sanh nơi trí thủ thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ông mật thọ nương, hồng danh Ngài khắp bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lốp Xăng Tenzin Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Chanju senjo rinpo je ma je pa na je jo je je wa nyam pa me pa yang ko ne pe wa yong tong nian da wa rinpo je ma je pa na je jo je wa nyam pa me pa yang ko ne kong dong pe wa yong sa xie pe je jo je me do zhang ri ra lin xie nin de jian pa sang jie xin do mi de wu wa yi ru gun nang da xin la zhe pa yong gang ri ra we guo we xin gang de pen dang de wa ma lu zhong we xian re se wan tin xin jia zuo yi xia be si de ba ten yu ji ye dang gu ru ran na man de la ga ni ya. Well, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. We treated you with emptiness, so now we should treat you with lunch, I think.